G'day. We've got an A4 Audi 2003 model, 2 litre, and he's got a coolant leak on the driver's side or the right hand side of the motor there. So to start with, we're going to remove the air box there where the air filter is. Probably this little connector tube there for the air. These plugs here, make sure you disconnect them before you pull anything off as well, or you might do some damage. So you can see it there. It's got the little switch on the top. But what I might try and do is just lift the back of the transmission up, just so we've got a little bit more room to move in there. We'll take these 2 bolts or 3 bolts off here and just jack that up. Put a little block of wood in there. You can see above on between the floor and the gearbox there's a bit of room there. Now I don't think we need to take that off. That's a T40 in the middle there anyway. There we go. That's probably a bit more room. We'll just put a block of wood there. Just be very careful with your fingers when you're putting the block in. There we go. Heaps more room. So now we'll just take that plug out, undo the clamp, and there are 2 bolts, I think they're 10mm, that go into the back of the block. Good idea to just clean it, give it a good blowout before you take anything off as well. Now that bottom hose needs replacing as well, and that one actually goes under that firewall and it's behind or below that top hose there. So we might have to take the battery out and also take that top hose off. And you can poke a screwdriver in there and I think it releases that clip and that just comes out like that. Got the 2 bolts off and you can see we can now just sort of twist it around a little bit. Probably much easier to just take the top end of that hose out. Okay, a lot easier that way than getting that little clamp off there. So now it's just a matter of taking the switch out, taking that little bracket off or that little adapter there. That's probably got an O-ring in there as well. You just take that little spring steel clip off. We'll put a normal hose clamp here so it's easier to get that one off. And just make sure you compare it with the new one. So now we just pull these little clips off. And that just wriggles out. There we go. And there'll be an O-ring in there that we need to replace. And the same with the switch. Pull that off. And there's an O-ring there. Now we'll be able to just put some locking pliers on there just so we can get that hose off. That hose doesn't look too bad, but we'll definitely replace that with a normal hose clamp. One of those. And there's the part number for that hose, just for reference. And now we're just going to pop this O-ring out here. You can see it in there. Oh, there you go, it's broken. That O-ring's flattened right out. There we go. It's hardened and flattened out. This part looks like it has broken off a bit of that there, but we're going to reuse it anyway. It looks alright. We'll just replace that O-ring. We should be right to go. Okay, now the battery bracket that holds it down, we've got 6mm Allen key. You've got to move all this out of the way, and we've just slid the battery that way just so we've got a bit more access to that bottom hose there. We're going to replace that one. That's the one that goes through the firewall to that little housing. We're getting that bottom hose off there. And that's the one that we've just taken off. Looks like it's perished there. If you want the part number to that one, I think that number before the B is a 1. Okay, we've got our new hose. Coupling's already a part of the hose there. You can see it's crimped on. Make sure the O-ring's in there. The other hose, if you've replaced it, make sure it's on. We've got the new flange there. Don't forget the O-ring there. So first what we're going to do is thread that through, and then that just pushes on there. When you're pushing it on, just support that flange so you don't break anything. Always good to put a bit of lubricant there just so that seal goes on better as well. There it is, thread it through slowly. And it does go through pretty tight. And we're just going to put a normal hose clamp on there instead of the original one. I've got that hose through. I haven't tightened it yet. We've got our O-ring on there. Just make sure it doesn't drop out as you're manoeuvring this other hose through. We've got to put that in and put it on. If you were putting a little bit of Celastic on there, put a tiny little bead, because quite often that surface in there is pretty flat anyway. Just make sure that's nice and clean as well. O-ring's still on there. Up a bit, or
go up?
Can't see it.
Yeah, like that.
Threaded it through?
Yeah, it's threaded through.
Yeah, just need to push it towards you a bit. Make sure you get both the bolts on loose, and make sure that the O-ring doesn't drop out. And then we just take the tension off those hoses, just so it's not sitting there under tension. It's just got to sit where it's shaped naturally. We can tighten up that flange now. Now it's a good idea to just give that hose a bit of a wriggle, make sure it just sits properly, and then we can tighten up the clamps. Don't overdo these, you can split the plastic. It does have a ring in there through the bolt hole, just so you can't over tighten it, but don't go too crazy with it. Now we can put that back in, and we just I forgot to mention these two little slots. There's a wider one and a smaller one. You've got to line those up as well when you're pushing that on. It's a good idea to just put a bit of Vaseline or some rubber grease on that, not too much, and that will just slide straight on there. It'll just clip in. Without lifting that transmission up, it would have been a very tight job. And I've just got it on, and now you'll hear the click. We've got that little switch, got the O-ring all flattened out, new O-ring. And that just sits over the top of that there like that, and that just rolls in. And also, good idea to just see how the plug's sitting, and just when you push that in, because it can rotate around, just push it in the same position. All back together, plugs in, new O-ring on the switch. Probably just good idea to spray a bit of WD-40 on all this before you put it together. Now it's just a reverse of pulling it all apart. Okay, we've just sprayed them. Just support these coils when you're pushing them in until you hear the little click. That hasn't gone in yet. Put the two screws in. Just make sure if these grommets have popped out, they go in easier if you go into the chassis. Just flip that up. And they go in there. Sometimes when you pull them out, the grommet will stay stuck on that box there. But they go in much easier if you put the grommet in first. Same thing with the cover there, make sure those grommets are in place. They will pop out. I'll just go on much easier on these. We've got it all back together. Just good idea to double check your work, make sure all the plugs are in. And now we've got to fill it up with coolant. And you'll notice under that cover, before you put that cover on, there's this tube that goes from the radiator to somewhere at the back there. That's actually a bleeder. You got to have the thermostat, which is under here, under the manifold, open up, and you shouldn't be getting any air bubbles out of there. It should be just a stream of coolant. What happens if you don't bleed it, you'll get an airlock in the top half of the motor, and steam can get hotter than water, so you end up doing a head gasket. And that's an Allen key, 5mm. Don't forget to lower the gearbox back down. Now you might have to just get a little pry bar just to guide those studs back in. While you're under it, good idea to just have a quick look around, make sure nothing out of place. Check your CV rubbers, you can check the oil level in the gearbox, all that sort of thing. And make sure you tighten those up. And you'll notice that the maximum coolant level mark is slightly above the height of that tube there. So we need to get the thermostat opening, the maximum level there, and we've got no air coming through there. There we go. So it's taken a little bit to get to there, but we still need to warm the motor up, make sure the thermostat has opened. So I'll put that plug back in, just leave it loose. And we've just got the coolant just slightly above there. Weird noise. Now what you can do is you can actually burp the cooling line. You squeeze the hose like that. You'll see it bubbles up. Sometimes it'll help eliminate some of the air bubbles in there. Just make sure you're careful because that will get hot. And I've just tightened that up loosely just so it doesn't keep coming out of there. Ran it a bit, it's warmed up. But you can see when I'm squeezing that, there's a lot less air bubbles going through. We're on about 50 degrees. And now I can loosen this. You can see the air bubbles coming out. Now I'm not going to take it right off, I'm just going to loosen it. You see those air bubbles are coming out there because that is slightly lower than the level in here. When those air bubbles stop, then I'll just tighten that up and it should be right. But you still need to warm this up. I'd say the thermostat's started to open. You can't do it when it's cold. You've got to let it warm up a little bit. There we go. Almost got a constant flow there. No air bubbles. We can tighten that up. And that thermostat should be nearly fully open by now. Now what we need to do is pressure test the system. I've pumped it up to 15 psi, you can see, well 16. And what I do is I just leave that there for about 10-15 minutes. Well, that's pressurised. I'll just check our work there. Up here, over here, or where any of your coolant pipes are. And over here, that one down the bottom there. It's all looking alright. There is an overflow on these expansion tanks, and it overflows into that groove, and there's a little hole in the middle of the expansion tank under there. So if you get water dripping down through there or coolant, you'll know it's just the little bit of coolant that's come out through there. And we've given that a good 15 minutes and it hasn't moved at all. So that looks pretty good. And if you have a look, it actually has 79mm cap and an 81mm cap, and should pressure test it up to probably 18 to 22 psi, not the 15 like we did. Just release pressure on that. Job's all done. Very similar to do same sort of thing on different vehicles, so it's not limited to just Audis. Anyway, I hope that's helped. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave any additional helpful hints or comments in the section below. And don't forget to throw us a beer if any of this information has helped you save a bit of money or time or both. Thank you for watching.